Welcome to the Year 12 Computer Science Revision tutorial on programming theory. The first part is about licensing requirements. Network licensing is important to understand for large companies. It is when you purchase a number of seats. Once the seats are used, the software stops anyone else using it until it is freed again. It allows for flexibility. Enterprise licensing typically allows unlimited use of the program throughout the organization. Proprietary software licenses are created when the software publisher grants the use of one or more copies of software in the end-user license agreement. A typical software license grants an end-user permission to use one or more copies of software in ways where such a use would otherwise potentially constitute copyright issues. An end-user license agreement is a legal contract between the manufacturer and the author and the end-user of an application. The end-user license agreement details how the software can and cannot be used and any restrictions that the manufacturer imposes. User needs an interface include easy navigation, different device types, access, friendly GUI, online help. Also the need for large buttons, large text and non-clashing colors. Ucode needs to be efficient. These days people get frustrated if they have to wait. You need to be mindful of development time and the impact it has overall.
Hi Grace, can you tell me about technical specifications?
Hi Jenny, yes, technical specifications is important when you design your programs. You have to be mindful of what type of machine will run your code. The last thing to note is that it is important to manage the development time either using project software or case tools. Gantt charts are also very useful in planning your time. Come inside and let's have some lunch and we can talk more about it.
This is a nice burger place.
Yes, it is my favorite. Okay, well, the next thing that is important is understanding professional ethics, especially when developing code. My motto is just because you can, does not mean you should. Programmers need to be aware of the law as well as ethical behavior when they create code to be used by people.
What are the legal obligations of developers?
They need to be aware that they are governed by the laws of the country. Australia also has a relationship with the US, which means that we are also governed by their laws too. Developers cannot create code that could break the law, especially the Privacy Act as well as the laws that can govern supporting terrorists. I know it sounds odd, but it is true. They need to be aware of copyright issues, the security of data and an infringement issues that could occur.
I see that is important for them to understand. What about the end user?
The end user also has legal and ethical responsibilities. They need to be mindful that they cannot copy softwares. This is against copyright. They cannot share data with others. They are also governed by the Privacy Act and need to protect data that belongs to their clients. They also need to be aware of the rights of the software owner.
There is so much to remember. What is next?
The software development cycle and where it fits in with the SDLC. It is actually in the development stage of the SDLC. But programming has its own cycle as well. The SDC helps with planning and developing software solutions. The first one requires the information from the design stage of the SDLC. We need detailed requirements. This requires the programming team to understand what the requirements are. Following this is the understanding of the data types and structures required for the code. The programmer will then normally code the data structures and instructions. They may go to the end user and see if it is what they wanted. Prototyping is important at this time. I like to see prototyping as an early version of the code which needs some feedback. It does not have all the bells and whistles but is functional. Once the code is created, it is important to debug it so as to remove any syntax or logic errors. A syntax error is an error in the syntax of a sequence of characters of a language. For compiled languages, syntax errors occur strictly at compile time. A program will not compile until all syntax errors are corrected. For interpreted languages, however, not all syntax errors can be reliably detected until runtime. Logic errors are different. A logic error is a bug in a program that causes it to operate incorrectly, but not to terminate abnormally or crash. The next thing is to test the code to ensure it meets specifications. A trace table is a good way of doing this with test data.
What is a trace table?
It traces the code using data that meets or does not meet the conditions. For example, if you ask for students greater than 16 but less than 20, Your test data could be 9, 16, 18, 20 and 24. Outside the condition on both sides as well as inside the condition. Next comes the documentation of the code both internally and externally. Internally includes comments in the code, administration manual, troubleshooting guide and so on. External documentation would be for the user including user manuals, training manuals, fact guides, quick guides and so on. After all of that the code is implemented and tested again. This time with live data. It is normally a very exciting time. The code is lastly evaluated. Did it meet the brief?
That is a lot of information to take in. I think I will have a break and set another time with you to learn more.
Not a problem. See you next time. Thank you for listening to part 1 in a series of revision tutorials. This presentation was created by Carol Puttycombe for the WA Computer Science course.